I'm James Rosone.
And I'm Miranda Watson. We're the husband and wife writing team that created the military thriller Monroe Doctrine series and the military sci-fi series The Rise of the Republic.
We have some additional content we'd like to share with you guys today, and we hope you'll find it informative and entertaining. We're planning to create more videos similar to this in the future.
As always, please like, share, and subscribe. Now let's get started.
Chapter 5. Saddam Briefed. 4 September 1990, Al-Salam Palace, Baghdad, Iraq. As Saddam entered the briefing room, everyone stood. Tension was thick in the air, along with the cigarette smoke that clouded the ceiling. The invasion of Saudi Arabia should have taken a week. It's now going on a month, and the army still hadn't secured the country, Saddam thought, as he sat and surveyed the room. The conversation with the Soviet foreign minister 5 days ago replayed in his head. He knew they didn't have a lot of time left to finish their objectives. Taking his seat, he nodded to the briefing officer to start the meeting. He needed to know where they stood. A colonel from the Republican Guard walked up to the front of the room. He puffed his chest out a bit as he began. "Sir, the current situation is as follows," the man said as he pointed to a map of Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Oman, Qatar, and Yemen. The 1st Republican Guard Corps, with the 1st Hammurabi Armored Division, the 6th Nebuchadnezzar Mechanized Division, the 2nd Al-Medina Armored Division, and the 3rd Tawakkalna Mechanized Division are located in the UAE at these locations, he indicated, pointing at Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Ras Al Khaimah, Al Ain, and Al Wagan. The 18th Armored Brigade is in Salwa, Saudi Arabia, undergoing a refit of equipment as it was severely damaged in an airstrike launched by the Americans. Almost immediately, Air Marshal Hamid Raja Shala al-Tikriti started to speak. "Sir." Saddam shot him a look and raised his hand to stop him. "Continue, Colonel," was all Saddam had to say. "Yes, sir. The 9th Corps is in positions from Al-Jubail to Al-Khobar, to include Ras Tanura, Al-Katif, Dammam, and Al-Hofuf." Again he pointed to the respective cities, with the 45th Infantry Division occupying Al-Jubail, the 49th Infantry Division occupying Dammam, and the 1st Infantry Division in Al-Hofuf. The 10th Armored Division is in the north to respond to any attempt at an amphibious landing, and the 17th Armored Division is in the south, prepared to do the same. "Good," Saddam said, then motioned for him to continue. "Sir, in the center of Saudi Arabia, the 4th Corps has seized Riyadh and positioned their divisions with the 16th Division, remaining in King Khalid Military City, the 20th Infantry Division in Buraidah, and the 30th Infantry occupying Unaiza. The 34th Infantry Division is in Riyadh, and the 36th Infantry Division is in Al-Majma'a. The 1st Mechanized Division is in Al-Kharj and occupies Prince Sultan Air Base with security. The 6th Armored Division is in Ad-Dubaya, and the 21st Infantry is in Al-Muzamia to pacify any resistance." The colonel pointed to several locations around Riyadh as he spoke. Saddam said nothing but stared at the map. Finally, he nodded for the colonel to continue. The colonel seemed a bit uncomfortable with what he was about to say next. More than a few corps commanders shifted in their seats as well. "Sir, the 2nd Republican Guard Corps currently occupies Medina with the 7th Adnan Motorized Division and is in a defensive position with the 5th Baghdad Mechanized south of the city." Saddam looked over at Lieutenant General Ra'ad al-Hamdani, the 2nd Republican Guard Corps commander, but did not ask anything, and was not offered anything in return. "Please continue, Colonel." "Sir, the 2nd Corps is moving south at this time with the 7th Infantry Division at Massadr, the 37th Infantry Division at Al-Jadid, and the 51st Infantry Division at Madain Saleh. The 2nd Infantry Division is occupying Tabuk. The 14th Mechanized Division attempted to attack and seize Dubai along the Red Sea, but was hit by American jets and badly damaged in these mountains. They are currently at Shigri and are being refitted with new equipment and personnel, the colonel explained, almost hesitantly. Saddam turned slowly in his chair, his frown so deep that his black eyebrows almost covered his eyes. Tell me, Air Marshal Hamid Raja Shala al-Tikriti, why my divisions are being bombed and by whom? You told me you had swept the Saudi Air Force from the sky. What seems to be the problem? Saddam asked. He already knew the answer, of course, but he wanted to hear it from his air marshal. The others in the room knew that when Saddam used your entire name, you were typically in trouble. Squirming in his seat, the air marshal responded, Sir, the Americans have reinforced their single carrier in the Arabian Sea with 2 additional carriers in the Red Sea. They also have some Air Force F-15s flying out of Egypt. It also appears a single squadron of F-111 medium-range bombers that had been stationed in England have been relocated to that same Egyptian airfield. And you are not capable of dealing with these aircraft. Do you not have the latest in Soviet fighter planes? Yes, sir, we do. Then why are you not able to defeat these aircraft? Are they a better aircraft? Or are they better pilots? Or is it the case that your pilots are afraid to tangle with the Americans? Are they not trained in the use of these latest aircraft? Saddam was rapid-firing questions to the air marshal. Get back to me later and explain the situation to me, Saddam said, letting him off the hook for now. He turned to the briefing officer. Colonel, what is the enemy situation at this time? He asked, needing to know what else was going on. Currently, we are facing off against a mixed number of Saudi forces in and around Medina. The Americans rapidly deployed their 82nd Airborne Division, along with elements of their 101st Airborne Division, to Jeddah. From there, they were able to reinforce the remaining Saudi units, and currently have us held up in the mountains just south of Medina. It appears they intend to either delay the Second Corps or attempt to further delay the 2nd Republican Guard Corps from reaching the port city of Jeddah. There are also some Saudi National Guard forces operating around Medina as a guerrilla force, raiding the supply convoys from Riyadh, the colonel explained. And the Americans, what are they doing beyond blocking us from taking the port? Saddam inquired. It appears the Americans are in a defensive position just west of Medina. In addition, the Soviets have provided us with intelligence that indicates a new plane ferries supplies or reinforcements continuously every 45 minutes around the clock. What has kept us from overrunning the American positions entirely has been their attack helicopters. The Soviets provided us with satellite images that show at least 1 and possibly 2 battalions of attack helicopters in the area. Saddam pressed, Explain to me why these attack helicopters have been able to stop our forces again? Looking uncomfortable with the question, the colonel tried to explain. Sir, when we launch an offensive with our armored vehicles, the attack helicopters show up and shred them with their laser-guided and TOW anti-tank missiles. This has forced us to leverage more of our forces as light infantry, something the Americans are substantially better at than we are. Even then, when it looks like we might overrun one of their positions, their attack helicopters swoop in and save the day. Saddam shook his head in frustration as he glared daggers at his air chief. And in Oman? He pressed, as he turned his gaze back to the briefer. This was the one area he was most concerned about. If the Americans could build up a large enough presence there, they could push them out of Saudi Arabia. In Oman, it is reported that the Americans' Central Command headquarters is being established in Muscat. They appear to have a number of pre-positioned support ships from Diego Garcia arriving in Dukm as Sultan Qaboos Port and Masira Island. These are the kinds of supply ships the Americans have in different regions of the world, pre-positioned with tanks, light armored vehicles, munitions, and other supplies for their military to fall in on at a port or airfield. Again, Soviet intelligence has shown us that a squadron of American aircraft have landed at Muscat International Airport, and U.S. Marines have been seen setting up a base camp outside of Muscat. Saddam held a hand up to stop the colonel. Tell me, those 2 American ships that were sunk, they obviously weren't sunk by us, so who sank them and what did they sink? The question caught the briefer off guard, but he quickly regained his composure. We believe it was the Iranians. We've known for some time that they had been looking into purchasing some Soviet submarines. It would appear they have purchased at least one of them. As to the ships, our understanding is these are the types of ships that resupply the American carriers and other warships at sea. It is possible that their sinking may curtail some naval missions, maybe even some of their fighter operations. That is good to know. Back to Oman and Jeddah. Have we seen any American heavy armor forces arriving there yet? Asked Saddam. Only a company of light tanks from the cavalry squadron with the 82nd Airborne, but 4 tanks and 4 Bradley fighting vehicles from the 24th Mechanized Division arrived also. What do the Americans consider a light tank? The American light tank is a M551 called a Sheridan after one of their famous generals from their Civil War. It can be dropped by parachute and swim rivers. It shoots a 152mm gun and the MGM-51 missile with a range of 2,000 meters. So, Colonel, what you are telling me is that the Americans and the Saudis have very little ground combat power in that region at this time. Is that assessment correct? Saddam asked, slowly turning away from the briefing officer to look at Lieutenant General Ra'ad al-Hamdani, the 2nd Republican Guards Corps commander. That is correct, sir, the colonel replied, glad that he wasn't the one in charge of any of these divisions or corps. Lieutenant General Ra'ad al-Hamdani, can you please explain why your 2 divisions could not destroy an airborne division? A division that, I might add, is not fully deployed yet. Saddam inquired, his eyes boring holes in his commander. The others were relieved that the heat was off them now. Sir, the 7th Adnan Division was the lead division from Buraida to Medina. They faced an intense delaying action with American jets engaging them at every wadi, combined with ambushes from the 45th Saudi Armored Brigade. We believe there may even be American Special Forces soldiers fighting alongside them, advising them, and calling in airstrikes. Once the 7th reached Medina, the fighting turned into a vicious street battle, which further depleted the division on top of being attacked from the air by the Americans, and then American artillery guns being flown in. The general lamented as he recounted some of the battles the Adnan Division had been fighting. And the 5th Baghdad Division. What was his problem that he could not get through this 82nd Airborne Division and seize the international airport and cut off this spigot of American supplies pouring into the country? Saddam casually asked, like this should have been a trivial thing for them to have accomplished. Sir, the mountains west of Medina have a limited number of routes through them, and the Americans concentrated their forces along those routes. While our forces had a 3-to-1 advantage in numbers, the Americans were able to concentrate their forces where it mattered most. Then they introduced their Apache attack helicopters, which utilized some kind of laser-guided missiles. When they fired on our tanks, they never missed, General al-Hamdani said, explaining as best he could how the battle had unfolded. If I am not mistaken, we have our own helicopters, yes? We do. And they did participate in the attack. But our helicopters do not have this same kind of sophisticated weapon system. Our Soviet helicopters require our aircraft to be moving while attacking. The American Apaches were able to hide and hover, allowing them to pop out from behind a ridge or hill to carry out a devastating attack and then duck back down behind that same hill. This is not a capability our Soviet helicopters can replicate, al-Hamdani explained. Well, in that case, I suggest you change our tactics to fit the situations, Saddam pointed out. What about close air support? Did you not employ it? We did, but the American interceptor jets were on them very quickly and effectively. We lost a number of jets before they were able to reach the front or carry out any serious damage, al-Hamdani said in a resigned voice. Tell me, Air Marshal, how did this happen? You tell me we have air superiority and yet our ground units are taking a beating, Saddam asked, looking directly at General Shala al-Tikriti. Saddam was no longer smiling. Al-Tikriti hung his head in frustration before replying. As I mentioned previously, we did not expect the Americans to respond so quickly. They repositioned not one, but 2 of their aircraft carriers into the Red Sea and then secured basing rights in Egypt, allowing them to relocate several of their fighter squadrons and now medium-range bomber squadrons. Utilizing their airborne, warning, and control aircraft, or E-3s, over the Red Sea, they were able to spot our ground attack aircraft taking off and heading towards their objectives. It's the same with our helicopters. Once they saw our air and helicopters getting airborne, they guided their own interceptors in to engage ours before we knew anything was going on. We've tried to spoof the Americans by deliberately holding our interceptors back at a higher altitude, hoping they would go after them while our ground attack planes went in low and fast, which is why they did not have fighter cover. But their E-3s saw through our deception and guided different groups of their own fighters to engage ours. It was a mistake that I will not allow in the future. Staring at his air marshal, Saddam thought to himself, "You are right, Air Marshal. It is a mistake you will not make again." Finally, Saddam told him, "See me after this meeting. We have much to talk about." It was obvious to everyone in the room that this would be a tough conversation. Taking a sip of his tea, Saddam turned his attention to General Muzahim Sab Hassan al-Tikriti, commander of the country's air defense forces, and asked, "General, what have our air defense forces been doing? How many American aircraft have your forces shot down?" "Yes, Mr. President, the air defense forces have not been idle." The remark was meant to sting his Air Force counterpart. "We have engaged the American aircraft successfully on several occasions, forcing them to abandon several of their missions. The SA-9 and ZSU-23-4 systems our Soviet advisors provided are making a big impact. As our supply lines are being stabilized, we're deploying more of our surface-to-air missile systems in groupings and patterns designed to tear the American aircraft apart." Saddam seemed to perk up a bit at the news, excited to hear about something going well. General Muzahim continued, "During the Battle of Medina, we positioned several of our SA-6 systems further back from our ground forces, and while they were not effective against these low-flying American Apache attack helicopters, they were able to engage the American medium-range bombers flying out of Egypt. Since these aircraft first appeared over the battle space, we have successfully shot down 5 of them." Saddam smiled at the news, so General Muzahim continued, "We have also engaged and shot down 12 American F-14 Tomcats, A-6 Intruders, F-4 Phantoms, and F-15 Eagles. I do want to point out that while we are scoring victories, when we turn our radars on, the American A-6 Intruders and F-4 Phantoms engage our radar sites with their anti-radiation missiles. These are missiles designed to zero in on the radars being used to guide the missiles to their targets. This has resulted in us losing 19 radar vehicles and half a dozen launchers. We have not deployed any of SA-2 or SA-3 systems near the front lines as of yet. I am having them emplaced around the East Coast, covering Ras Tanura and Al Jubail. I would like to move 2 batteries and place them in the vicinity of Dubai to help cover the strait." "Do it, and General, good job thus far. Gentlemen, I cannot stress enough that we must secure Saudi Arabia as quickly as possible." As Saddam spoke, his glare fell upon General Ra'ad al-Hamdani and General Ra'ad Rasjod, the 2nd Corps commander. "If the Americans get a foothold, then it will be very difficult for us to continue our actions into Oman while our side is exposed. Do I make myself clear on this matter?" Both al-Hamdani and Rasjod avoided eye contact with him, but nodded their heads. "Before I return my attention to the army," Saddam continued, General Muzahim, prior to this war starting, our Russian friends provided us with a limited number of their advanced SA-10 surface-to-air missile systems. When the foreign minister visited me a few days ago, he said they were leasing us an additional 2 brigades worth of these systems. If I understand our current deployment, we have one of those systems deployed around Baghdad, and one around Imam Ali Air Base in Nasiriyah, and 2 more in Kuwait. Now that we know the Americans are going to intervene, and they are specifically going after our supply lines and armored units, perhaps we should look for other ways to implement this strategic surprise where it can cause the most damage. General Muzahim thought about Saddam's question. Finally, he knew where they should place them. Sir, I'd like to recommend we place 1 battalion in Al-Kharj, where our Russian contractors are currently staying. This will help protect our fighter squadrons and provide a wide umbrella of SAM coverage. To aid our efforts in the West, we should move one of these systems to the airport in Medina. This will greatly increase our aircraft's ability to be guided to the enemy without having to turn their own radars on until the last moment. The system's missiles also have a range of up to 150 kilometers, with up to 330 kilometers of detection and surveillance. Yes, this is what I want to hear. Ideas like this, Saddam said excitedly. Smiling, General Muzahim continued, I'd also like to propose another battalion in Salwa. This is a critical supply junction the Americans have already hit us on. By positioning the battalion in Salwa, we'll be able to better protect our supply lines and most of Qatar. Then I'd like to place 2 battalions around the King Khalid military city and Dahran. These last 2 positions will provide a wide interlocking bubble of air defense against future American attacks. Lastly, I want to move 2 of the remaining 4 battalions to the UAE in preparation for what will likely come next. The last 2 I'd like to station here in Iraq, further reinforcing our defenses at home. The Americans are likely to use their B-52 bombers or B-1 bombers at some point soon, and I'd like to have a special present waiting for them, one they'll never suspect. Saddam laughed at that. He seldom laughed during these meetings, but the thought of how surprised the Americans would be when they discovered the S-300 system brought a true smile to his face. Turning serious again, Saddam looked at his ground commanders in the west. General Al-Hamdani, do we need to commit the IV Corps to replace you at this time? No, sir. With the refitting of the 7th and 5th Divisions, and them joining up with the 2nd Corps, we should be able to overwhelm the American positions around Jeddah by the end of next week. 14 days, tops, Al-Hamdani said. Ra'ad Rasjod nodded his head in agreement as well. Good. Then see that it is done. Time may no longer be on our side. We need to complete our objectives and consolidate our gains before the Americans are able to marshal their forces. We need to make taking Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states too costly for the Americans to endure, Saddam explained. He then stood and turned to leave the room. As he left, he turned back again. Gentlemen, no more mistakes. He then motioned the air marshal to follow him. Chapter 6. 101st Moves to Defend. 8th of September 1990. King Abdulaziz International Airport, Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Benny, I'm damn glad to see you finally arrived, Major General Ed Ford said, a broad smile spreading across his face. He and Major General Benny Peters had been classmates and friends at the Virginia Military Institute, or VMI. Physically, both men were about the same size, but personality-wise, they were complete opposites. Peters was the quiet one, whereas Ed was always talking and seldom listening. General Gary Luck liked working with them. They were each other's yin and yang, and he fully planned on exploiting that. All right, if this love fest is over, we can get down to business, General Luck said with a slight smile as he motioned for the 2 commanding generals to walk over to a table with a map spread out. Benny, what's the status of the 101st now? He asked. Well, sir, all of my Apache and Cobra gunships are in country now, along with the 229th Apache helicopters from Fort Rucker. The 2nd Brigade closed this morning on Jeddah. Soldiers from the 1st and 3rd Brigades started flying in yesterday morning. Without any unforeseen shipping problems, I think we will have closed the entire division here by the end of the month, minus some equipment. Our first ship left Jacksonville on the 19th of August, and the last ship sailed this morning, General Peters noted. That's great. Right now we need some fresh troops. Look here. General Luck pointed to the map. Benny, Ed's division is occupying this ridge west of Medina and has the 7th and 5th Republican Guard divisions scratching their heads trying to figure out how to get past him. So we have a tough situation shaping up in the north around Medina. If I had to guess, I think the Iraqi commander is planning to wait until the 3 divisions of the 2nd Iraqi Army Corps move down from the north and attempt to take Ed's position from the side and behind, Luck explained, as he dragged his finger from the top of the map down to Ed's position on Medina Ridge. Peters nodded in agreement. Well, sir, it sounds like I need to prevent that from happening. Laughing, he added, "Here I go again, covering Ed's ass just like I had to do at VMI." Ed jabbed him in the ribs, but didn't disagree with General Peters's assessment. His airborne units were in a very tough position along Medina Ridge, especially after this last battle. His division had taken an absolute beating, but had dealt one too. General Luck went on to explain, "My intelligence folks tell me there are 3 approaches they could use from where they are currently located. One division, the 7th Infantry Division, is located here at Masadair, about 100 miles to the north. Another is located at Al-Jadid, about 120 miles to the northeast, and we think that's the 51st Infantry Division. The 37th is following the 7th, so we suspect this will be the main effort or line of attack once they make their next move. I'd like to point out that the 7th Division got chewed up pretty good by a few airstrikes when they got to Tabuk. I think they'll attempt to break through, or at least try to punch a hole in our lines and allow the 37th to move through it. The 51st also has a good road, but some difficult terrain. If he gets off that road and it brings him into play on the northeast face of Medina Ridge, we could be in trouble. The 7th has the worse approach over a 2-lane road through some really nasty terrain if he gets off the road. My fear is the 37th will hit just as the 51st joins the 7th and 5th Republican Guard divisions and makes a push against the ridge." "Benny, how soon will your division arrive?" Luck asked again. "Sir, we only have some minor stuff left at Campbell. All the attack aircraft are here along with the Cobras in the Cav squadron. Blackhawks should be arriving in a week aboard the ships. We'll fly them off as soon as they're within range. Who's coming in after us?" Peters asked. "The 3rd Herd is supposed to join us, but I doubt if we'll see them or the 24th. I think General Schwarzkopf wants them in Oman, and I can't blame him. This is pretty restricted terrain in this part of the country," General Luck explained. There was silence as all 3 general officers studied the map. Finally, the silence was broken by an air raid siren. "What the—" General Peters didn't finish his sentence when the first bomb slammed into the parking ramp in front of the main terminal building. As the 3 generals found themselves on the floor, more explosions could be heard on the far end of the runway. General Peters just had to ask, "Does this happen very often, sir?" "Not sure yet. This is only the 2nd time since I arrived. I guess I'm going to need to look into getting us some air defense units, aren't I?" He chuckled as another bomb went off. Xotito Entort, Airborne HQ. Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. The various colonels representing the different G directorates sat and listened to the G2 intelligence officer give his initial brief. For many of them, this would be their first major overview of what was going on with the war in their particular sector of the war. "General, looking at the terrain, I can see 3 avenues of approach into our sector," Lieutenant Colonel Mike Cordray said, pointing at the map. Lieutenant Colonel Cordray was the division intelligence officer. He'd been an infantry officer earlier in his career and transferred to military intelligence just prior to making major. It wasn't that he disliked the infantry, but he was more intrigued with the intelligence systems and the intelligence preparation of the battlefield. He was also damn good at what he did. The first and most dangerous avenue runs from Massadar in the north to Abu Karamel to Shajwa and enters our sector at Al-Dalia. It's a 106-mile run, with the widest point being 13 miles at Huraymil and Silila Aneza. In most places, the route is less than a mile wide, with high ridges overlooking it. It's also some pretty difficult terrain for wheel vehicles to negotiate, Colonel Cordray concluded. General Peters acknowledged the information with a nod, but said nothing. That was his style. Say little until he had formulated an intelligent question. Sir, the second avenue of approach, and frankly far worse than the first, starts at Al-Jadid, over very open and easily negotiated terrain, following this highway to Al-Eshash, to Khaybar, to Al-Latin, and coming in on the right front flank of our sector. Once the Iraqis reach the mountains, they're restricted to a 2-lane road all the way through our sector. This area on the left side of his approach appears to be open ground, and it is, but it's flint rock, boulders, and deep crevasses, and will be almost impossible for a wheel vehicle to cross. Even track vehicles will have a difficult time of it. The first 45 miles are open ground with good mobility, but from then on for the next 100 miles, it's follow the leader with no place to go if stopped, Cordray explained. So a solid airstrike on them if they go that route pretty much bottles them up. Good to know. So, tell me about this third avenue, Peters asked. The third avenue starts out like the first, but at Sulayla Juhayna, it breaks off and goes southwest through the mountains to the coast. It's also through some very rugged terrain, and has few places that they can disperse and spread out, the colonel stated. Where does this third avenue terminate? It terminates on the coastal plain in the vicinity of Yanbu. If the Iraqis were to get here, they'd have good mobility to roll into Jeddah 176 miles to the south. Pausing for a moment, Colonel Cordray said, I would think if he got to the coast in any kind of shape, the 10th Saudi Mechanized Brigade could take him, depending on how badly chewed up they were coming through the mountains. Well, we might see what we can do to help out the 10th, Peters said. One other point I would like to make, sir. It'd be very difficult for their heavier air defense system to track our aircraft in this terrain. Their SA-7s and ZSU-23-4 will be effective, but anything that relies on radar guidance is going to have a tough time of it in these mountains, Cordray added. Good. That will make Cody and the Chopper Boys happy, Peters acknowledged. Sir, if there are no questions, I will be followed by the 3, Colonel Cordray concluded. Peters nodded his head again. Colonel Provost, the operations officer, took the pointer as he and Cordray passed and stepped in front of the map. Sir, I have reviewed the orders from 16th 8th, Airborne Corps, and our mission and sector. We've been assigned a wide sector, but considering the terrain and the restrictive nature of this sector, I believe we can accomplish our mission. The first and second avenues of approach are the most dangerous to us. I told our air liaison at CENTCOM that we're going to need more air defense and offensive support if we're to hold our current positions. We're facing at least 1 and potentially 2 Iraqi corps. I believe I sufficiently made the case for an increased air presence, but we'll see in the coming days. Peters said nothing. Sir, I propose 2 courses of action. First, we establish the forward edge of the battlefield from Shajwa to Al-Latin, with the forward limit of troops being established from here to Hushim. This gives us a depth of about 26,000 meters for the deep battle on the left flank and 18,000 meters on the right flank. I propose we put 1 brigade on the right avenue and 1 on the left. A 3rd brigade would be positioned in depth around Al-Mulayli. This would provide sufficient depth for the attack birds to hit them and wear them down before they even got to the forward limit of troops, well as the artillery and any TACOM air we get to engage them. There's also an opportunity for the attack birds to strike that 3rd Division as it approaches Alpha Ka'ali, Colonel Provost said, as General Peters moved forward in this seat to study the map. And the other? Peters finally said. The 2nd would have 2 brigades taking up positions, with 1 brigade defending from Abu Haramel to Tara'a. Another brigade would defend from Huraymil to Shajwa and effectively close the end of the engagement area. There are some goat trails that we could use in Hummers to resupply, but most of the resupply would be by air, Provost said, pausing for a moment. None of these courses of action will allow us to concentrate artillery support, so each brigade would have to rely only on its own 105th Battalion. Corps artillery may be able to back up some of our battalions, but not by much. We will be relying on the attack aircraft and TAC air, Provost concluded. Peters stared silently at the map for another minute. Finally, he said, "Colonel, I like Course of Action 2. Course of Action 1 has us too far back and not taking advantage of the depth to get the infantry hitting them. We can wear him down in Course of Action 2 and stop him with the brigade to the rear. Our deep battle can engage him for some time before he reaches our front-line units. Let's get it flushed out and run it up to CENTCOM and brief the brigade commanders. I'm going to move the Saudi brigade to cover that 3rd Avenue to the coast. We just don't have the combat power to cover that avenue as well. With CENTCOM's permission, I want us moving into positions as soon as possible and getting away from this airfield before it gets hit again." Chapter 7. A Legend is Born. 12th of September 1990. 495th Tactical Fighter Squadron Valkyries. Hurghada International Airport, Hurghada, Egypt. Major William Gunslinger Kidd sat in his chair as he watched Captain Wolfe from the 1N shop stand up to give them his portion of the mission brief. The 1N shop was the Air Force's intelligence group, similar to the Army S2 or G2 intelligence shops. The last few weeks' missions had been tough on the squadron. They'd lost 4 of their 16 aircraft, 1 to enemy ground fire, and 3 shot down by fighters. Worse, none of the air crews had been recovered yet. They knew one of the planes had blown up with the crew still in it, while the air crews of the other 3 planes had managed to eject. They were presumed prisoners for the time being. This next attack is going to be against the 7th Iraqi Division, near Tabuk. We hit this unit pretty hard a week ago. The latest intelligence reports indicate they've just been refitted with some new equipment and replacements. They also appear to be getting ready to link up with the 37th Iraqi Division, just as the 7th and 5th Republican Guard Divisions are gearing up to make another hard push against Medina Ridge. Those poor blokes in the 82nd can only withstand so much. They've been getting pounded with enemy artillery, mortars, and sporadic attacks for more than a week. Just last night they got hit by an enemy air raid, Captain Wolfe explained. Now it's our time to hit back. What you guys need to be on the lookout for are any additional SA-13 Gophers, SA-19 Grisons, and those damn SA-6 Gainfuls. Try to use the terrain to your benefit as much as you can until you clear the mountains and ridges. Also, one other major thing I need to tell you about. We're still trying to gather intelligence on this, but there's apparently an Iraqi squadron called 3rd Squadron. We don't know a whole lot about them other than they fly MiG-29s, and they're apparently in this neck of the woods. What we do know is these pilots are damn good. 2 of their pilots have already reached ace level, having each scored in excess of 5 aerial kills. Near as we can tell, this squadron has scored some 29 aerial kills since the start of the war. 19 of those kills have come against us, so don't think they're just getting lucky against planes parked on the ramp. Whoever these pilots are, they're damn good and know what the hell they're doing. Major Kidd interjected. Captain Wolfe, this is good information. Knowing this, what kind of fighter support do we have? Also, are we going to have some wild weasels flying ahead to clear us a path through the SAMs? As a matter of fact, yes. We have a dedicated E-3 sentry along with a flight of 6 F-4 Phantoms who'll run ahead of you as weasels and 3 flights of 2 F-15Cs as fighter cover. Oh, just so you're aware, the fighters are coming from the 71st Fighter Squadron out of Langley. They just arrived in Egypt a week ago and are flying out of Berenice International Airport, Wolf explained. Okay, if no one else has further questions, then that concludes my portion of the brief. As Captain Wolf left, Major Kidd walked up to the lectern. Okay, this is it. Our 7th mission in 10 days. We've all learned a little bit about what works and what doesn't on these missions, so let's put that to good use. As you know, we're still waiting for our new squadron commander to arrive, so for now, I'm still it. Their squadron commander had gotten shot down deep inside Saudi Arabia a week ago. For the time being, Kidd had taken over. Once we cross into Saudi, I want everyone to do their best to hug the terrain features like we have in the past and stay ready for whatever may come next. We're going to go in just like we have the last 2 missions. That trick we've been playing on them seems to be working, so let's stick to it. I want Karma 4-2 with me. Karma 4-3 and 4-4, you guys are going in the chute second. Karma 4-5, 4-6, you'll be going in third, followed by Karma 4-7, 4-8, 4-9, and 5-0 closing the show out. Remember, you closers will be plastering the area with cluster munitions. That means you need to drop your ordnance with at least 2,000 feet of altitude. The rest of us will be carrying 8 sticks of MK-84 heavies. We have a lot of enemy vehicles in the area spread across a wide area. We're going to need the heavies if we're to mess things up for them. Several of the pilots let out a few whistles at the news. They didn't usually carry the heavier 2,000-pound dumb bombs. Those kinds of weapons were typically good for carpet bombing type missions by the buffs. Then again, dropping 64 of them across the Iraqi division's positions pretty much counted as a carpet bombing mission. 90 minutes later, the Valkyries had just topped off their tanks' complements of a group of KC-10s as they loitered over the Red Sea. The Wild Weasels from the 81st Fighter Squadron had just gone in ahead of them. They were flying down the same flight path the Aardvarks would in a few minutes, clearing the path of enemy air defense systems. If all went according to plan, the Iraqi SAMs would engage the Weasels, who were better suited to counter them and take them out. Then Kidd's flyers would zip in behind them down a cleared-out path to carry out their strike. All of that was being covered from high above them by 3 pairs of F-15Cs from the 71st Fighter Squadron. If those enemy MiGs from the Iraqi 3rd Squadron showed up, the Eagles would give them a run for their money. Prior to getting airborne, Major Kidd looked at the entire mission package for this mission. They had a total of 39 aircraft involved in supporting just one single mission. Quite a bit when you thought about the number of individual airmen needed to make a single mission fly and work. The radio in his helmet crackled to life. Karma 4-1, Eagle 2. We're showing clear skies, no enemy aircraft. Panther element is 10 mics into the chute. We're not showing any signs of SAMs. You are cleared hot to enter the chute. Kidd smiled. It was time to go earn their keep. Eagle 2, Karma 4-1. That's a good copy. Karma elements will begin entering the chute as outlined in the package. Out. Switching over to his internal squadron net, Gunslinger related the attack order and information to the other 11 pilots. It was time for them to head in and hammer this enemy division. Angling his aircraft towards his new heading, Gunslinger began dropping in altitude. His aircraft steadily moved from Angels 15 down to just 100 meters above the deck as they crossed over onto land. His heads-up display or HUD's navigation unit guided him down the path he needed to travel. In moments, he saw the valley entrance and knew exactly where he was. They'd flown through this path once before on a mission a few weeks back. It didn't have too many curves to it, which made it easy enough for their larger, fast-moving aircraft to navigate while still shielding them from ground radars. When they emerged from the valley, they'd be less than 5 minutes from their target. As they zipped through the valley, he'd already swept their angled wings back, reducing their drag and further reducing their radar cross-signature. Looking down at his altimeter, he saw he was fluctuating between 96 meters and 105 meters at a speed of 610 knots. They weren't cruising at supersonic speeds, but they weren't far off either. As he looked outside his canopy, the ground and terrain around them whipped by in a blur. They were traveling so low and so fast you just couldn't make out the finer details of what you were flying past. If you looked off in the distance, or further ahead of you, you could see those details. For the next 15 minutes, they rode in virtual silence. Gunslinger's bombardier and co-pilot, Captain Tommy Kung Fu Hansen, continued to run through his checks, making sure everything was ready. Gunslinger liked Kung Fu. The man was a beast in the gym and an amazing martial arts instructor, which was how he'd earned his nickname. He'd been teaching many of the pilots in the squadron various self-defense tricks they could use in case they had to eject. As they approached 25 minutes to the target, their radios crackled to life. No one was speaking to them directly, but they could hear the excited chatter going on with the Panther element. From what Gunslinger could tell, they were in a real fight. They were calling out one SAM or gun truck after another, with the code word Fox 3 being called in quick succession. They were apparently sending one HARM or high-speed anti-radiation missile after another at the targets. "Sounds like the Panthers are giving them the business," said Kung Fu. "Yeah, it sure does. I hope it means they'll have cleared the area out for us. I'd like us to get through this mission without any further losses." "Agreed. It's kind of hurting morale." 5 minutes till we're out of the chute," Gunslinger announced over the comms. "Roger that, Gunslinger. We're ready to bring the pain," came the excited voice of his wingman. These kinds of missions were what pilots like them lived for. They'd spent their entire Air Force careers up to this point training to do this exact type of mission across Germany and Europe in case the Ruskies decided they wanted to get froggy and ignite the Cold War. Now they were doing these kinds of missions for real. "Holy crap, look at that!" Kung Fu blurted out, startling Gunslinger. Looking up, he saw exactly what his friend had shouted about. In the distance, the battle was raging just beyond the end of the chute, which they were rapidly approaching. They saw strings of red and green tracer fire crisscrossing the sky. Normally, you wouldn't see this level of clarity with tracers during the day, but the sun had largely been obscured by dense cloud cover, so it was a bit darker than normal for this time of day. The tracer fire was thick, too. It was intermixed with little puffs of black smoke, which they knew instinctively was flak. That meant the enemy not only had SAMs and gun trucks set up, they'd also moved in some anti-aircraft artillery equipment to the area. AA and SAM fire was one thing. Introducing AAA to the mix was a whole new ballgame. "Whoa, we're going to need to change things up? Spin up our EW pod while I let the others know what we're about to fly into." Gunslinger let his flyers know they were about to fly into a huge, straight-up mess, and likely an ambush by the Iraqis. They must have figured they'd be gunning for this same division, because they had moved a lot of additional guns over to protect them. All Karma elements, Frago. I say again, Frago to original plan. I want everyone to pull out of the chute and go supersonic as we climb to Angels 20 and reapproach the enemy from position Beta. Just as he'd applied more power to the engines, pushing them past Mach 1 as he climbed for altitude, one of the Panther aircraft exploded off to their right. He didn't have a lot of time to glance at it, but he saw it just long enough to see the two pilots eject and their chutes open. Thank God, at least they made it out of the plane. As his aircraft climbed, pushing past Angels 10, his raw, or radar, homing, and warning system blared in their ears. It told them a single SAM site had locked onto them. Moments later, the tone from the Rayhaw changed as a SAM had fired. Then the sky around them filled with gunfire as some of the radar-controlled gun trucks tried to blot him from the sky. "Missile launch, 5 o'clock in closing," Kung Fu announced. He was working their EW pod, doing his best to jam the enemy missile's radar lock. Meanwhile, Gunslinger was doing his best to maneuver his way deftly through the gunfire around them, while at the same time trying to put some distance between himself and the missile that was chasing after them. Giving the engines more juice, he clawed at the air for more speed. Then it dawned on him that he still had his entire stick of ordnance attached to him. Aside from the weight, it was killing his maneuverability. Checking his position, he saw he was just now crossing over top of the enemy division. Without giving it another thought, he hit the arming button on the bombs and released the entire stick. Of course, racing across the sky at Mach 1.1 at an altitude of 13,000 feet meant his stick of 8 2,000-pound bombs would be spread wildly across the area. He just hoped they caused some damage. With the bombs no longer slowing him down, his jet took off even faster. He pushed it for all it was worth as the missile warning alarm continued to blare, letting him know the damn thing was still chasing him. As he angled the large aircraft into a slight roll and dove for the deck, he felt the tension in the airframe from the massive G-forces he was putting it and himself through. As they flew lower, dropping below 15,000 feet again, they found themselves back in range of the AA gun trucks once again. Their radar-controlled vehicles directed the guns to open up on him, sending renewed bullets right after them. On the ground, he saw one of the enemy gun trucks explode when a HARM missile slammed into it. He also saw a SAM vehicle blow up a minute later. He was glad to know the wild weasels hadn't moved from this enemy trap, and were still doing their best to cover the bombers. He just hoped the rest of his guys did better than he had in going after their targets. "That missile is still on our tail." "Not for long, watch this," Gunslinger said, as he pulled up hard on the flight controls. The big aardvark pulled out of its steep dive and then spun into a climbing corkscrew of a move as it sought to regain the altitude it had just lost. The SAM that had been on their tail moments earlier slammed into the ground, exploding harmlessly. "Hot damn! Now that's some flying, Gunslinger," Kung Fu congratulated him. Before either of them could say anything, a string of cannon shells zipped right across their cockpit, scaring the hell out of them. Then the aircraft shook hard as more than a handful of the shells slammed into them. Gunslinger turned the aircraft to the right and changed their altitude rapidly to throw the gun crew on the ground off as another group of shells just missed them once again. While he was doing that, Kung Fu was checking their gauges to make sure they hadn't sustained any serious damage. "I think it's time to turn back for home. Our luck's just about run out." "Yeah, I agree. I think I'm going to need to change my flight suit. That was close." Turning to head back home, Gunslinger counted his pilots. While the mission had gone sideways, and they hadn't been able to hit the Iraqi division like they had planned to, they hadn't lost any aircraft. They'd still delivered their ordnance, though the results looked a bit mixed from their vantage point. Sadly, the Panther unit flying the Wild Weasel mission ahead of them had suffered the brunt of the ambush. They'd lost 2 aircraft while 2 more had taken damage. In exchange, they'd succeeded in destroying 9 AA gun trucks and 5 mobile SAM trucks. Taking out that many enemy air defense vehicles meant the next mission would have that many fewer resources from which to defend the division. Once they returned home, they'd regroup, assess what had been damaged, and then work up another mission to go hit the exact same division. This time he'd advocate for them flying across more of the desert and approaching the enemy from the rear. This way they wouldn't be flying right into the hornet's nest like they had this time around. Chapter 8. Plans are adjusted. 13th of September 1990. Iraqi Army Forward HQ. Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates. General al-Dulaimi had called a meeting with his division commanders at the Presidential Palace in Abu Dhabi. The Al-Ras al-Akhdar was one of the most luxurious palaces in the world, with a private beach, yacht basin, manicured lawns, several swimming pools, and tennis courts. The opulence was amazing and, in Al-Dulami's mind, made the palaces in Baghdad look cheap and tawdry. He was rather enjoying the opportunity to stay in such fine accommodations. As each of the division commanders came in, they were directed to the central conference room and served an assortment of tea, coffee, and milk, along with a selection of fruits and pastries. "Gentlemen, if you will be seated, we can begin today's meeting," announced a colonel and member of Al-Dulami's staff. As each commander took a seat, Colonel al-Baghdad pulled up a map on the overhead projector depicting the corps sector and the location of each of the divisions. "General al-Tikrit, you are the northernmost division, so let's start with you outlining your positions," General al-Dulami said. "Yes, sir. In the very north, the terrain is rugged, too rugged for any mechanized or armor force. It is my understanding that the American 82nd Airborne and 101st Airborne are in Jeddah dealing with a similar type of terrain. They've shown that an infantry force can hold down a superior force pretty well, especially if they have attack helicopters. Seeing how this has played out, I have only one battalion there operating out of Ras al-Khaimah. Moving south from there along the border to the ocean is also very restrictive terrain. However, around Fujairah there are good port facilities and a major highway through the mountains into the heart of my sector. We seized the naval port at Fujairah, and it is ready to be turned over to the Navy for their use, whenever they get here," he said. His sarcasm was noted by the others. "I have positioned a reinforced brigade along that coastline and requested additional long-range artillery and air defense to counter a possible amphibious landing by the American Marines. The hydrography will support an amphibious landing with a wide beach of sand that could support track vehicles. I am preparing the beaches now with the Corps engineers to create obstacles along the beaches, but we are talking many miles of beach with easy egress off them. Our defensive positions will be in buildings, and we are moving the local population out of the homes and buildings within 2 kilometers of the beach," General al-Tikrit concluded. For a moment, General al-Dulami said nothing but studied the map and rubbing his chin. "General, you probably have the most dangerous avenue of approach into the Corps. I want you to move your entire division to the Fujairah area. General Ujail, your division will assume responsibility for his previous sector. I know that is a large area, but with the strait closed to the Americans, you have little threat until they force entry." "Any questions?" General al-Dulami asked, directing his question at both commanders. "No, sir," was the unanimous response from both generals. They knew better than to question his order on this matter. "General Assad, please discuss your defensive plan," General al-Dulami requested. After his latest meeting with Saddam, he needed to make sure his commanders were as ready as possible for what might be coming with the Americans. He didn't need more grief from the boss. He needed to win some battles and pray to Allah the Americans would see reason and pursue peace. "Sir, the terrain forward of my sector is very rough, with only one major road coming from Oman, Highway 7. The rough terrain stops about 15 kilometers short of the border in the north to 50 kilometers from the border in the south. The city of Al Ain unfortunately sticks like a finger out to the border, exposing 3 sides. We seized the military installation in Al Ain, an air wing, with no difficulty. There were no aircraft there, however, and it appears they likely flew them to Oman. My intent is not to occupy the area, but to build my defenses in the Al Ain area. I intend to keep my tank force mobile and ready. This way they'll be ready to respond to any movement by an attacker's force once I identify where the main attack will be coming from. Although Al-Barami is on the Oman side of the border, if we see any major force coming on Highway 7, I will attack first to occupy Al-Barami and deny the enemy the ability to close unmolested right up to my defensive positions, General Assad explained in great detail and with a few maps. If you must do that, do not employ your artillery in Al-Barami. We want to win the hearts of the people, not turn them against us. Understood? General Al-Dulaimi pointed out. Yes, sir. Understood, came the expected response. Turning his attention to General Daly, commander of the 6th Nebuchadnezzar Mechanized Division, Al-Dulaimi explained, General, I am most concerned about your sector. We are placing a lot of faith in the empty quarter, deterring an attack from that direction. That means you are the only unit protecting our flank from that direction. While I am more concerned with an attack out of Oman from Tanam and Fahud, we cannot fully dismiss the idea of the Americans attempting to move through this sector. Keep in mind the dunes in this area parallel the avenue of advance, and will help mask their movements if they opt to go that route. General Daly countered, The dunes will also conceal our positions as well. We have ample depth to see into Oman and identify where they are going to attack from. This is not easy terrain to try to cross with a large military force. The distance between the dunes is anywhere from 1.5 kilometers to 3 kilometers, creating rectangular boxes running east to west. It would be very difficult for any mechanized or armor force to move through this area unnoticed. Continuing, General Daly added, What I believe they will do is look to capitalize on the one paved road that parallels the border north to south and then turns west, right to my positions. Our infantry forces will have time to reposition if necessary, and my armor forces will be positioned to respond as they approach. I suspect the Americans will come at me in the right flank, where the larger, more pronounced dunes do not exist, and the more open ground provides good mobility for their tanks, in hopes of cutting our forces off, leaving us bottled up in the UAE. Al-Dulaimi grunted at the blunt assessment. See that you do not let him come that way, then. The last thing we want is to get a division or a corps cut off in the UAE. Now I'd like to hear about the intelligence we are receiving about the American buildup in Oman, General, he said, acknowledging a brigadier general that had been sitting in the background. His uniform indicated he was from the 8th As-Saika Special Forces Division. The other division commanders had sort of forgotten about the Special Forces Division after they had bypassed the important oil refineries. Sir, the 8th As-Saika Special Forces Division has been operating in Oman since June, acting as dockyard workers and other laborers. This has given us an opportunity to observe what the Americans have been doing as well as the British. It has also given us an opportunity to determine targets for demolitions and attacks when the time comes. He paused as he moved to the map of Oman that had been projected on the screen from the overhead projector. Currently, the Americans have ships unloading at the Said bin Sultan Naval Base, located in Al-Mudaik, 87 kilometers north of Muscat. They have some ships, the Ro-Ro ships unloading in Liwa, and ships unloading cargo and containers in As-Sultan Qaboos port. We have people at both of these locations recording the amount and type of equipment coming into the country. In addition, it appears that one U.S. Marine division is unloading at Duhuwa on Masira Island, using landing craft and their LST transport ships to load over the beach, as well as hovercraft to bring supplies ashore. There are no major port facilities on Masira Island, so moving supplies and people ashore with the hovercraft and the landing craft is necessary. There is a facility just off the airport that we believe they are going to use as their headquarters. We're trying to get some workers to infiltrate it so we can verify that and potentially sabotage it. I also want to note that at the airfield, we spotted a squadron of Marine Harrier jets. They are being stored in the hardened aircraft bunkers on the airfield. One of my commanders believes he may have found the Americans' primary headquarters location. They believe it's being established at the Oman International Exhibition Center and Oman Tourism College. These are located just outside the Muscat International Airport, where some American aircraft have been landing and offloading military personnel. This places them close to the Omani government and the airport itself. It's also large enough for their enormous staff to work out of. We've managed to get a couple of people into the catering staff and janitor service. Again, once we have official confirmation that this is in fact the primary location, and you've given us permission, we'll look to carry out some sort of attack on the facility to see if we can kill some of the senior leadership." Before anyone else could ask a question, the Special Forces commander quickly added, "I also want to bring your attention to this. This is a set of warehouses that have just been secured in the Gala Industrial Estate. Some are being used to house people, and others for stockpiling supplies. I bring this to your attention because it is now becoming abundantly clear that the Americans are planning to launch the bulk of their military operations against us out of Oman, not the Saudi port area of Jeddah." One of the generals then asked, "What about these Harrier jets? I've heard they can land and take off like a helicopter, making them incredibly versatile. Do we know where else they are being held?" Nodding at the question, Colonel Hassani explained, "Yes, we did find another location. Here, in the vicinity of Sohar, we spotted some Harrier jets that had landed. We could not determine if they were American or British, as they landed shortly after dark and were quickly covered. In Sohar, there are 3 cantonment areas being prepared for military use: the Sohar Major Industrial Park, the Dunes Cricket Grounds in Majan, and the Towel Workers Camp. Across the highway from the Towel Workers Camp is a school that has been turned into a headquarters for what we believe will be a division. There are 2 palaces northwest of the airport and adjacent to the airport that we believe will become the Marine headquarters and another division headquarters. As things progress and more intelligence is gathered, we will continue to provide it to you," Colonel Hassani concluded. "Thank you, Colonel, for that intelligence update," General Al-Dulaimi said. Colonel Hassani gave a slight bow and headed for the door. The generals around the table looked impressed with the detailed assessment their special forces had been able to provide. It was exactly what they had needed and wanted. Turning to the division commanders, Al-Dulaimi asked the group, "So, gentlemen, what is your assessment based on what our special forces have been able to acquire for us?" "Sir, I think the 2nd Al-Medina Armored Division will be taking on the U.S. Marines. It appears to me that they are building up an amphibious force to make a forced landing. The question is, where? I think there are 3 important places that they'll need to conduct their combat operations. The first is the port of Fujairah, as it is the major fuel offload site, and they are going to need fuel for their armor forces. The second location is the port of Khor Fakkan, as it is the only port that has a container offload capability anywhere along the coast besides the As-Sultan Qaboos port in Muscat, which is a long way off and not as capable as Khor Fakkan. Lastly, they will want the airport at Fujairah, as it is the only multi-runway airport in this part of the country. Those are the 3 centers of gravity for the Americans," General Al-Takrit said confidently. "I think your analysis may be correct, General. I will expect you to develop a plan to defend this area and get back to me within the next couple of days. I want to see 1 brigade moving into the coastal area very soon and engineer work commencing as soon as you have a plan developed," Al-Dulaimi said. Then he turned his attention to General Ujail. "General Ujail, I want you to work out a plan on how you are going to reinforce General Al-Takrit if the main attack comes against him, and how you will reinforce the others as well. I would like that within a week with priority to the 2nd Division. Any questions?" "Sir," General Al-Takrit asked, "I only have 2 brigades and I see the defense of this sector, which is 27 kilometers long, as requiring a minimum of 3 brigades and preferably 4. "I think you may be right, General. When the 18th Brigade is refitted next week, I will send them to you as soon as it arrives," General Al-Dulaimi explained, looking at his aide to make sure he made a note of that order. "Now, if there is nothing else," Al-Dulaimi said, as he stood and left the room.
Thank you for watching our video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you'll never miss another video.
In the meantime, we have plenty of reading material to keep you busy. You can find it all on our website, frontlinepublishinginc.com.